Hello and welcome to Real Opinions. This is a part of a special Halloween feature that will provide a brief overview of the horror genre in gaming, with different recommendations for every type of player. So what I'm going to be doing is going through different genres, different styles, different periods, and I'm going to try and find something I can recommend to you so that no matter who you are, you'll find something here that you'll like. This is part 4 of the feature. We're looking at Until Dawn. So far, every game in this series has been an outright horror game, which makes sense. What else would I recommend for Halloween? Well, there is something I'd like to call attention to that, whilst not strictly speaking a horror game, does at least embrace the genre's themes and its tropes, and then reworks those ideas into a new framework. That game is Until Dawn, Supermassive Games' love letter to the slasher genre, which comes in the form of a branching narrative interactive story game. You know interactive story games, they're those things where you can't really fail in any way, shape or form, and instead just make decisions for characters and occasionally hit a button when it appears on screen. It's, QTEs and character choices. I'm going to employ an overused analogy, so please forgive me, but basically, they're like choose your own adventure books. These games effectively give you 16-hour-long cutscenes and then you're asked to decide what someone will say or do. For the most part, I have to admit, I'm not really a fan of these things, as I don't see the appeal when there are already games that include choice-making mechanics as well as actual gameplay, like Mass Effect, Fallout, whatever. Why The Witcher? Why do I have to choose between games about choices and games where I get to play when there are games in the middle that let me do both? I also don't see the point, because if I just wanted to watch a movie, I'd watch a movie. However, Until Dawn is different. Until Dawn works because it taps into something that we all do when we watch a slasher film. Think about it. How many times have you watched a horror movie and found yourself yelling at the dumb characters on screen to do something different? Don't go in there! Why'd you pick up that weapon? Don't split up! Well, now's your chance to actually prove yourself. Now you're in charge of their decision-making capabilities. Do you hide under the bed, or do you keep running? Do you investigate a strange noise or stay exactly where you are? Who lives and who dies is all up to you. You get to play God with these teenagers' lives, and it is so much fun. Apparently, the intended goal is supposed to be to get as many of these dickbags to survive as possible. Why on earth anyone would do that is beyond me. I mean, have you actually ever played The Sims? If you have, be honest, did you try and look after your characters and ensure that they had happy lives, or did you remove the ladder from the swimming pool and watch them suffer? Did you sadistically torture them? Yeah, that's what I thought. Of course you're going to try and get these people killed, especially when they're so annoying. They're so perfectly annoying, though. They fit into genre archetypes. They're the exact horror characters that you hate, and they're so hip, and they're so millennial, that they're practically begging to be dismembered, because they can't get away from the phones. It's taking selfies and saying all these hip things, and you're just like, oh god, I can't wait to get you decapitated. I don't want to babysit them anyway. I don't want to deprive myself of the gory spectacle of a horror film. I don't get enough control in my own life, but at least I can make these pricks suffer. In this branching narrative department, the game does do a lot right. Most importantly, it makes your choices actually matter. I cannot overstate how important that is, because so many of these games fail to do this, and they have to find convoluted ways to neuter the consequences of your decisions. You play the Telltale games and you know that you're always going to be guided back to a certain path, and you'll have a bit of control and your experience might be slightly different, but it doesn't matter. But Until Dawn gives you expendable cannon fodder characters who have nothing to do besides die, and so you get to toy with their fates. Any of the 8 playable characters can snuff it in multiple ways and in differing combinations. For the first half of the game, it does keep a few alive so that, the game doesn't just end, but by the time the credits roll, you could have literally nobody left standing. And it's so brutal with it too, which I love. Certain seemingly inconsequential decisions can have irreversible consequences, and characters can die over things as trivial as whether or not they trip over a log. In one of my playthroughs, I managed to keep everyone alive until one bad move had a ripple effect that led to 3 unintentional deaths. It was devastating and so cathartic all at once. The game even allows you to track the repercussions of your decisions via a comprehensive menu so that you can replay things and try things a different way next time. It's a nice touch, and one that you'll come to appreciate if you ever want to do it and try and ensure a certain outcome. you know, you want to try and make sure a character lives in your next playthrough. These menus and these kind of sensible tracking things, they help you really understand what leads to what. There's also so many neat little gameplay additions involving like the PS4 touchpad. There's the exploratory sequences that require you to search locations for clues and objects. And much like in Alan Wake, the amount of story information you receive is dependent upon what you find. And certain narrative threads can be locked away entirely should you miss the right pieces of evidence. Similarly, if you fail certain QTE moments, you can go to slightly different locations and even set in motion new set pieces. I was watching someone else play it recently and they failed a certain action sequence that I didn't fail, and it caused them to miss out on a whole chunk of the game that I had. It was a really great bit of the game too, one of the best parts I thought, and they didn't get to see any of it. And I love that the game is willing to block access to huge chunks of the story like that, because it makes me wonder if even I've experienced everything that there is to offer. It makes me want to go back. There's also these great don't move sequences, I love these. Basically, you're asked to hold the PS4 controller still, and it will measure your steadiness. It has the motion controls, and if you fail, your character might be detected and they may be unceremoniously slaughtered. And the harshness of these sections is so brilliant and so satisfying, because it means that if you make it, you feel like you did well. But if you don't, it's all the more shocking just to see your character die like that. It's so much fun, but at one point I will admit I actually lost a character because I sneezed. And it made me like shake the controller. That was a little annoying, but I appreciated that it was so brutal with its decisions. It doesn't let you reload saves either, so you can't go back and change your choices, which is so important. I don't know why more games don't do that, because what's the point in having choice-making mechanics if you want to go back on them? That's one of the weaknesses of those choose-your-own-adventure books, is you could always just hold, like put a bookmark in place, turn to another page, and then go, oh, I don't like that outcome, and go back. But no, in this one, you can't do that. One gimmick that is a little wasted is the use of the therapist character. In these sequences, you'll come face to face with a psychiatrist who's played by the wonderfully over-the-top Peter Stormare, and he will evaluate you based on your responses to certain questions. These questions range from which of these images frightens you the most, and you'll like scan through a book and pick 3, to which character do you like the least. And the implication is that your results will then tailor your experience in a dynamic way. The reality, however, is that your answers will only make a cosmetic difference. For example, if you say that you're afraid of spiders, then a tarantula will crawl across the screen at one point. Meanwhile, the character that you specify as your least favorite will later appear on a photograph with their face violently scratched out. Wouldn't it be more interesting if it were these decisions that had the most impact on the game? I personally would have loved to have been pursued by my greatest fear because I chose it, like choosing the form of your own destroyer, Ghostbusters style. Elsewhere, the actual story in the game is actually above average slasher material. It does indeed walk a fine line between functioning as a pastiche of like the most generic slasher you can imagine and actually being the most generic slasher you can imagine. Basically, a group of obnoxious horny teens go on a trip to a secluded cabin, which is in the mountains. To be fair, it's not the woods, on the anniversary of a prank that went fatally wrong. Their intention with this get-together is to put everything behind them. Oddly enough, they do this by continuing to prank each other in the exact same way that led to the horrible thing last year. Like, they keep doing it a lot. They keep pranking each other, I don't get it. And they hope to move on with their lives. Unfortunately for them, a masked killer is roaming around the mountains, seemingly intent on forcing them to confront their pasts. It's very like, I know what you did last summer, but with a healthy dose of Saw, Halloween H2O, that's a film, I've not made that up. Halloween H2O is one of the Halloween films. And Friday the 13th are also thrown in for good measure. Which is fine, because whilst this would be very by the numbers in cinema, for a video game it's weirdly unexplored territory. It's the same thing I said about Outlast with the found footage. In a film, this would be the most generic thing ever, but for a video game it's not really been done before. Horror games, you're always fighting against monsters and inhuman threats, and it's all combat heavy or puzzle solving, but we've never really had a slasher. I know Clock Tower existed a long time ago, that's more of a point and click game, but we haven't really had a proper slasher film like this as a video game. And this is the rare chance to see how this different medium would deal with the teen horror boxes. It's something different. In fact, I don't think it would work half as well if it didn't tick all of the cliches. Because the central appeal is that you're now in control of a slasher movie. That's not going to be as fun if you don't get to play around with familiar tropes. I think it needed to be generic, because if it wasn't, then you'd lose some of that kind of fantasy kind of appeal. The whole point is that I'm in control of these films that I normally watch and get sick of. So you need it to be a little generic. But there is a third act twist that changes everything up, in my opinion, in a spectacular way. I know it divides a lot of people, but for me, it personally elevated the whole game. It's not like it comes out of nowhere, and in particular, anyone who wonders about the killer's POV shots will see it coming a mile away. I saw it coming almost instantly. But it's a satisfying reveal that turns the tables completely for the climax. It also helps that it starts to riff heavily on one of my all-time favourite films, once the action relocates to a cave setting. Overall, Until Dawn is an extremely fun and subtly clever game that is disguised as the dumbest slasher flick imaginable. With tons of replay value, an intriguing mystery, and intense set pieces, this is honestly one of the best games of the current console generation, and I really believe that. Recommendation. This is for the casual gamer, or even for parties. I mean, here's an idea. Say you have a group of friends. Get each one of you to take charge of a specific character or characters, and then just play the game. Swap it over when you change character in the game, pass the control to someone else, and just watch the madness unfold as you make all the wrong decisions and get each other killed. I think it'd be so easy to make a drinking game out of it. I can't think now, but you'd all yell at each other to make different decisions. It's exactly the same as watching a horror film on Halloween. You yell at the characters on the screen, now you get to yell at the person with the remote. So yeah, I'd recommend this for a good fun game to play with friends, or indeed on your own, to be fair. I played it on my own. But yeah, this is definitely the most casual game I'm going to recommend, and I would give this a very high 8 out of 10.